Right. So we just read the Grimm's brothers story, Hansel and Gretel. You want to give a little summary?
There's a family that lives in the forest, and um, it's Hansel, like the bigger brother, and Gretel, the little sister, and their dad and stepmom. Um, they're like a very poor family, and they're struggling with just having food on the table.
Yeah, I think
Uh,
there's some kind of famine kind of going around.
mhm. So one day they are running out of food, and the children overhear their um dad and stepmom talking about the problem, and this they overhear the stepmom specifically saying that they need to like save themselves, and that the way to do that is to leave abandon the children in the forest, because it's better to have both of them survive than for everyone to perish from hunger and starvation. So when I overhear that, uh, Gretel gets really scared, and I think she starts crying. Um, but Hansel reassures her and says that they'll be okay and that God will help them. So later in the night, after he had overheard that, Hansel wakes up and he starts collecting little pebbles from outside their house. And he goes back inside and they fall asleep. And then later, early in the morning, the stepmother wakes them up and tells them that they need to go into the forest because they're going to go get firewood as a family. Uh, I forgot to add the detail, like the father had was initially really against abandoning his children, but he kind of let himself be persuaded by the wife, by the
Yeah,
stepmom.
yeah. And she
Um,
gave a rational
yeah,
calculation that otherwise we'll all four starve.
yeah. So like once he relents, they go to that trip into the forest, and they tell the children that when they stop at a certain spot, and on the way there, Hansel keeps like dropping little pebbles, but he's pretending to look at his house. And when the stepmom asks why he's turning back so often to look at the house, he tells them that he wants to say goodbye to his white kitten on the chimney or roof. And the mom tells him that he's dumb and that it's just the sun shining on the chimney. But he keeps doing that as like a cover to like drop pebbles on the floor. Um, Once they reach a clearing in the forest, the stepmother and father they instruct them to stay put, and that they're going to start a fire to keep them warm while they go to chop wood. So they gather uh, wood and kindling for the fire, and they light it up. And then the stepmom tells them to rest and to fall asleep, and while they go chop wood. But instead of chopping wood, the dad just ties like a tree branch to another tree or something, and that creates a sound effect of like an axe. So they're trying to trick the children into thinking they're still there cutting wood. They fall asleep to that sound, and then they wake up in the middle of the night, I think, and they notice that the sound has stopped, I probably, or that they're no longer there. So Gretel starts panicking and saying that they'll die in the forest, but Hansel reassures her that they'll be able to find their way back with the pebbles he dropped. Um, so they wait for the moonlight to come to shine on the rocks, and Hansel takes Gretel by the hand, and they walk all the way back home by like looking at where the rocks are. And yeah, they go inside the house, and the dad uh, greets them. He's happy and relieved that they actually survived and that they're back.
But the
Um,
stepmom was
Stepmom,
she chided them.
yeah.
You naughty children, why have you slept so long in the forest? We thought you were never coming back at all.
Mhm.
Covering their tracks.
Mhm. So then time passes and they reach the same problem again. Like this time, they only have half a loaf of bread left to eat. So the stepmom like speaks to the dad again, and they overhear her at night when they're supposed to be asleep, saying that yeah, it's happening again, and that they really need to try to abandon those kids again deeper into the forest this time. And the father, again, he doesn't want to, but he kind of relents because she's just so insistent on it. So the next day, no, so actually before that, the stepmom locks the door so that Hansel couldn't get out to like collect pebbles. Then she probably put two and two together of how he came back home. So this time she locks the door, and when Hansel is trying to do that again, he finds that he's locked inside at night. So he reassures Gretel since she's panicking again that God will help them, that they'll be okay. And the next day, the stepmom wakes them up again with the same story that they need to go into the forest again as a family to get firewood. So this time, uh, she gives them a piece of bread,
They got a
and
piece of bread the first time, too.
yeah, yeah. But this time, since he couldn't get the rocks, Hansel uses the breadcrumbs to make a trail back home. And this they're dropped off deeper into the forest this time. And they do the same thing. They make a fire and tell them the same story that they're going to go chop firewood. And the dad does the trick with the tree branch again to fool them into thinking they're nearby. But yeah, they actually just abandon them. So night falls, and um, yeah, they go to sleep, and then wakes up, and she starts panicking again about not being able to get home. But Hansel reassures her and says that he left breadcrumbs this time so that when the moonlight shows up, that they'll be able to go back home again. And they find that once moonlight hits, that all the birds and creatures of the forest had eaten the crumbs, so there's no way to get back home with that method. But they still try, and but they get lost deeper in the forest. Uh, and when they think they're going to die for sure of starvation and hunger, they find a house
Well, they see a
after following a
beautiful,
white dove. Yeah.
yeah, they see the beautiful snow white bird sitting on a bough, and it sang so delightfully that they stood still and listened to it. And when it had finished its song, yeah, it spread its wings and then it
Mhm.
flew and they followed it and then it sat on the gingerbread house.
Yeah. So they find a gingerbread house, and yeah, they're astonished at it. And Hansel goes to eat a piece of the roof. And Gretel, she goes to eat part of the window pane. And the first time they start doing that, they hear a voice saying, "Who's there?" But they respond back that it's the wind
Hmm.
passing through. So
Yeah.
and after that, they want to eat even more. So Hansel takes a big chunk of the roof, and Gretel like takes out the window pane or window. Um, and when they start eating it, the like a witch, like an old woman, comes out of the house and asks them who they are. Uh, and and then she uh, expresses sympathy for them and invites them inside her home, where she has a lot of good food like pancakes, apples, and milk, and they feast upon it. And later, it starts to become nighttime, and she prepares to beds for them with clean linens, and they fall asleep thinking that they must be in heaven. Uh, but that was just a cover, and the witch, she's actually a wicked witch, and she uses the gingerbread house to lure children to eat them. And she wakes them up early in the morning, and uh, yeah, she kind of drops her mask and forces Hansel to go into a stable with the intention of fattening him up to eat later. And she forces Gretel to be kind of her servant and going around like helping her with all of that stuff. And yeah, the witch makes a lot of fattening food for Hansel, and I think Gretel brings it over, or
And
she,
Gretel only gets crab
yeah,
shells to eat.
yeah. So like the witch goes to take food to Hansel, but he finds a way to trick her by finding a little bone, because she likes to like ch touch their finger to see how fat they're getting, and she uses that to determine when to eat them.
That's right. And
But he,
because she has dim eyes, it says
mm,
that witches have red eyes and they can't see very well, but
mm,
they smell well, like like the beasts.
mm. So yeah, whenever she wants to like check his finger, he just holds like a little bone to trick her into thinking he's not ready. Um, but eventually it happens so much that she gets very frustrated that he's not fatting up, and she just wants to cook him and eat him
That's right. After a
anyways.
month.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, she announces her plans to Gretel, and then she forces her to help her uh, prepare for the feast uh, by like cooking food in the oven. So she gets some dough, and uh, then she's with Gretel at the oven and instructs her to get inside the oven to make sure it's prepared for to bake the bread that she was going to have with Hansel when she ate him. But Gretel knows that it's just a trick and that she actually intends to push her into the oven to eat her too. So she feigns confusion and asks the witch like that she doesn't know how to do that, and if the witch could show her. So the witch tells her like, here, this is how you do it, and she pokes her head into the oven, and Gretel uses that moment to like push her into the oven and lock the lock the door. So the witch bakes to death in there. And then she runs outside to the stable and um, frees Hansel and tells him that the witch is dead and that, yeah, they could go now. So they go back into the witch's house and they find all sorts of pearls and jewels, and they take as much as they can with them. And then they, yeah, leave, and they start going in the right direction because, and they eventually reach a river, but they're unable to cross. And in the river, they notice a white duck, so they call that duck over, and the duck is able to take them one by one across the river. And
Yeah, Gretel
once,
is the one that finds the white duck and she
mm,
sings so that it comes over.
mm, yeah, and so once they're past the river, they begin to recognize that a lot of the forest is starting to look more familiar, and they're able to go back home uh, to their dad. So they kind of burst into the home, and the dad is really happy to see them because ever since he abandoned them, he never had a moment's peace. And the stepmother had died uh, at some time while they were gone. Um, so yeah, when they get there, the dad is overjoyed, and they drop all the pearls and jewels they had found.
Yeah, so problem solved with
Mhm.
their poverty. Yeah, it was interesting that this story is where basically the kids solve the problem.
Mm,
And then, of course, the women are the ones that want to like abandon and consume children.
mm,
Yeah, what did you think?
mm. I like this story. Um, yeah, like when I heard it, I hadn't heard of like the multiple attempts to get rid of them.
Yeah, I'd forgotten
Uh,
about that too. Only remember
yeah.
the breadcrumbs, right? Not the white pebbles at first.
Hmm. And
One thing I noticed about the story is all the deception.
mm,
There's the wife that, and the husband, goes along with it to abandon the children, and then they lie to them, to get them out there and to keep them out there for their deaths. And
mm,
then when they come back, she lies to them about, like, to cover up the fact
mm,
that they had indeed tried to kill them.
mm,
And Hansel also lies when he's leaving the pebbles and later the breadcrumbs to
mm,
the stepmom when she chides him for looking back and says that he was merely, the first time he says he was merely looking back at his white cat, the second
mm,
time at a pigeon or some pigeon.
mm,
And let's see, and there's deception. Of course, the huge deception is that the house that they find in the middle of the woods is like the answer to their problems,
mm,
and that the it's like food that is not really for their nourishment. It is a home that is not for their safety.
mm,
It is a hostess that is not for their comfort. So
mm.
everything is a deception in
Yeah.
that place. And
Mm,
yet it solves the problem for them if only they are able to deceive the deceiver, if they're
mhm,
able. I mean, it's kind of like, I don't know, any type of life and death situation where if you're able to outwit the predator, then you know you can
mm,
survive, and in this case, survive and thrive and solve the
mhm,
original problem,
mhm,
which is interesting. Like
mhm,
that the children are able to solve the problem, and only through the interaction with an evil that has, taken advantage of others.
mhm,
Because presumably all the riches that they find cached in the house were from all the other victims that
mm,
did not catch on. And there's also the deception when Gretel uh, sees that the witch is deceiving her about
mm,
the oven, the purpose of going in the oven, and then she
mm.
she is able to outwit the witch and put her in there. I would
Yeah.
also notice that when the kids deceive the evil women in the story, the evil women chide them like for their stupidity. So they
Mm,
openly mock them. And so that
yeah.
reminds me of the sort of formula of how uh, hubris leads to nemesis in like
Mm,
Herodotus, where
mm,
the your arrogance leads to destruction.
mm,
So they think these little kids, even in this translation, she uses the word simpleton one time. I think when Hansel and Gretel are going out and leaving the breadcrumbs, she calls him a simpleton. That's not your pigeon on the roof.
mm,
That's just the bread. I mean, that's just
mm,
the rising sun. But yeah,
mm. Yeah, and I thought it was interesting how like Gretel seems to kind of learn towards the end how to kind of use deception because she's initially relying on the deception on her brother's part to survive.
that's right. Yeah,
Uh,
he does
yeah.
everything to save them. The story is kind of about role reversals in a way.
Mm-hmm.
It's like all the women are not nurturing, the kids are the one that saves them and brings home the bacon, so to speak, or the huge cache of bacon. Uh, the father is the much more affectionate and sentimental one. Um, it mentions when they come home that he had not had like a day of peace since they left. Um, yeah, they the home is not the place where you can be safe and where you can have food and love. You have to go deep into the woods to finally find, uh, to finally find what you need.
Mm.
Yeah. But yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, when they go back, yeah, I don't know what the scene with the duck is. I just noticed that's another
Mm.
bird scene. Birds are all over this place.
Yeah.
Like when Hansel on their second trip out to the woods, when Hansel had left the breadcrumbs, it mentions that in the night it doesn't say all the beasts and everything, it just says all the birds, all the thousands of birds
Mhm.
in the forest had gone and picked up all those breadcrumbs.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. I
yeah,
think I'll,
with the little duck that brings them across, this is also
mm,
another bird.
yeah, I think like birds are kind of like symbols of salvation, especially in like Christianity. It's
Yeah.
like I think they represent like the Holy Spirit a lot of the time.
Mm.
Um, Especially like white birds.
I think that
Right.
might on a deeper level be about guidance. Like the
Hmm.
Holy Spirit is about some type of guidance, kind of like the conscience or something like
Hmm.
that, some kind of amorphous
Hmm.
thing that can guide you towards the more concrete thing of like the Son and the Father,
Yeah.
or it's probably like through the journey of life, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. Like it's this feeling, but a bird
Hmm.
probably represents that guidance. A bird, birds by by destroying the bridge back home,
Hmm.
and then there's another bird that brings them explicitly to the gingerbread house. But anyway,
Hmm.
it's birds. So they're in this predicament and they don't know what to do and they can't find their way and they're about to die.
Hmm. Yeah.
And birds are the ones that bring them to the gingerbread house,
Yeah.
to their not salvation in this case, not a spiritual salvation, but a physical, yeah, salving.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I was kind of confused of why the bird would lead them to the ginger house, but I guess it saved them for the immediate moment.
That's right.
So
And
in a
save them all.
way, it did save them for that
It
time.
gave them the
Yeah.
opportunity to save
Yeah.
themselves. Yeah. Yeah. At first it did seem malicious in some way. Like when we were reading it, I almost wondered why it wasn't like a raven or some, blackbird or something like that. Why did it mentioned it's like this beautiful white kind of bird, which, is obviously symbol of purity or something like that. So, but yeah, it gave them sustenance for that day so they wouldn't die. Because it had been 3 days that they hadn't had food. The story mentions that. Or that 3 days since they left home with only like a little loaf of bread. But then,
Mhm.
yeah, they had gotten rid of the loaf of bread when
Mhm.
when they were walking. Yeah, and when they cross the body of water, that is also maybe a kind of they've crossed a threshold back to the normal world, away from the dark, unknown, treacherous world. It had
Mhm.
mentioned on their second trip that the
Yeah.
parents had brought them into deep in the woods into a part that they had never seen before.
Mhm.
Before they had been in the deep in the woods, but now this was a part they had never seen before. So this is,
Mhm.
another world. This is, a world of extreme danger, of witches, of death.
Mhm.
But yeah,
Yeah.
the duck brings them across the body of water back into their neck of the woods.
Mhm. Yeah. Maybe it's kind of like a rebirth of sorts because it's kind of like a baptism again, where
Yeah,
they're kind of going into like a new life that's going to be better. And
that's right.
with like the stepmom out of the picture and going back to their dad and
That's
now
right.
having like these kinds of riches with them.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting that Gretel calls the duck over with her singing, and Hansel gets on the duck, and that's also just a cute image of like these kids
Yeah.
riding a duck. But
Yeah.
anyway, he's like signaling Gretel to come ride with him, but then she says, "No, he's too heavy. I mean, we're too heavy, and you'll have to ride across first, and then the duck will swim back and take me on its back on the second trip." And that is what happens. Do you have any notion of what that means?
Like that whole thing just getting on the duck.
No, the fact that
Um,
they have to ride it separately. And like Gretel's the one that figures out that's what they have to do.
well, I don't know, like
Maybe it's
maybe it's
something
kind
about
of like
each individual has to do that journey on their own. Maybe it has something to do with life and death or rebirth. Like each individual has to do it on their own in some way. Or
yeah, it's that's what I had a similar thought. Because like up until that time they've been like very maybe codependent and kind of s- just they hold each other's hands almost all the time. Um, but I
yeah,
thought maybe
maybe
this
this
is
is
just symbolic of
independence.
dependence and they're like growing up now and kind of uh kind
Yeah, it
of
seems
finding
like
their own self-reliance in a way.
yeah, it seems like it could be something like that. Well, yeah, yeah, it was a pretty good story. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention was it's interesting that when they get back, the stepmom is dead too. Of
Yeah.
course, you could attribute this to the circumstance of the story where there's it says there's a time of great scarcity. There's some kind of famine.
Mm.
Um, but I think this happens in other stories too sometimes where there's like a character that represents symbolically another character, like the witch represents the stepmother.
Mhm.
And when they killed the witch, magically it killed the stepmother in some way.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes this is the logic of myths or fairy tales where there's something like a moral logic or something like that. There's probably some technical word for it in
Mhm.
some studies, but yeah, it seems like there is a logical connection between their killing the witch, their vanquishing the witch, and the stepmother dying. You know,
Yeah.
yeah, and so yeah, all the good characters live, all the bad characters die. The birds facilitated it all. Anything else you wanted to talk about with this story? There's something else that I had in mind, but I actually it's not coming to me right now.
Mhm. Yeah, like I can't think of it. Yeah, anything
I
else?
mean, I guess the overall sort of theme I was thinking is something about how, yeah, faith wins out over like calculation. Like the stepmother had specifically been made to talk about the calculation of, which is rational. We need to get rid of the kids so that we don't all four starve to death. But the, Hansel talks repeatedly about how God will save us and everything. And they go to like the witch. And yeah, she has also been, she lures children. The story mentions this that she lures children there and she apparently robs them and eats them. So, which is a rational thing. You need to have meat to eat. So you know, you build this lure to trap them. I don't know what the logic is to eating children, but I guess maybe they're given her skill set, she's like an old crone and can't really move very well. It makes sense that I guess she would lure children and eat them instead of like trying to catch, wily beasts.
Mm,
But yeah, what she's doing is very rational and calculating and cold and everything, but it's a way to survive.
mm,
Yeah, and as opposed to like sort of the hapless um woodcutter father or the kids who none of the good characters who survive are living by calculation. They're living
mm,
by their wits and their faith and their sort of somewhat tenacity.
mm,
I think faith and endurance are kind of like very much linked in like the religious tradition. But yeah, any other thoughts?
mm. Not so far.
Yeah, but yeah, I like discussing these stories, and maybe we'll find another one for next week, and start maybe even cross referencing these if we
Mm.
can.